Well, g'day and welcome to Chat GTP. I am joined by Dan from Red Earth Reptiles. How are you, Dan?
Oh, good morning, Joe. I'm really well. I'm doing really well.
It is a good morning.
Ah,
I've
it's good.
maybe warming up already. I don't know. It's a pretty brisk, but I don't know, 17 or 18 degrees this morning, but it appears to be
Yep.
warming up.
Right.
I
Okay.
don't know how
Yeah,
that
it's still cool
has
for
if
me. So,
don't know if there's any implications to our breeding seasons. I think my groundwork has been done. I think I've got everything happening that I need to so far, I believe.
okay. See what
Maybe.
happens.
I don't know. What does
I
Darren
don't know.
say? All we can do is try.
That's it. That's it. Just
All we
keep.
can do
I'm
is
just
try.
putting them together, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so
Yeah.
um, we've got a green tree python legend in our midst today, and
Yeah.
this I was realizing this morning. This really is one for the chondro nerds out there. This episode.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, Tim.
yeah.
I think if you know anything about green pythons and Mister Blue, synonymous with Tim, but apart from all of that, he's just a nerd. I think when it comes to just he's given me so much reading material over the last 5-6 months. I've been on planes a little bit with work, and it's been excellent to be having just pouring through this really old, papers that were written in the 70s and 80s about breeding green pythons and other species. So just really appreciate I think his commitment. He seems to be sort of an archivist. That's probably how I'd describe him. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but he's and to boot a really really cool guy. And so yeah,
Well, I think that's a bloody fantastic intro. Let's bring him into the picture. G'day, Tim. How you going?
Good morning, gentlemen.
Yes,
good
good
morning.
good
And
afternoon.
Well, evening here actually, but
Oh,
yeah,
evening. Close enough. How is it?
yeah,
yeah, afternoon. Oh, we've had some good weather the last couple of days actually for mid-July, which has been nice because we've been getting hammered with triple-digit heat waves, and then
mm,
we've had a couple of pretty severe storm outbreaks over the since about the beginning of July.
Yeah, okay. And whereabouts are you geographically?
So I'm on the East Coast in Maryland, so
Yeah,
near Washington D.C.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Really is.
guess yeah,
From what I can gather from listening to podcasts, gone is that was really once upon a time very much a hotspot for chondro keepers back in the day.
yeah, and there still is a lot of people still around. I mean, really, up from the Mid Atlantic on up north. There's several people in Pennsylvania now, and some folks in Connecticut that do quite a bit. So
Yeah,
it's
okay.
still there,
Yeah,
and
right.
the people that were into it, whether or not we're keeping things, for example, myself or Trooper, we're still kind of keep our nose into it.
I think it's important to sort of keep a bit of a handle on what things are happening now. But I think before we get too carried away, maybe we'll just rewind and start how we normally start these episodes. If you wouldn't mind just giving us a bit of a rundown on your history with reptiles, and then I guess your history more specifically with the green tree pythons.
Okay, so I guess maybe like many of us, I became enthralled with reptiles at, roughly about 10 or 12 years old. Um, this was long before social media, phones, and devices, kept every kid indoors. So we would go outside and, track around the woods and look for things that we could find. And of course, snakes, for whatever reason, just encountering, a snake in the wild is always a special experience. And it took a while for me to be able, to convince my parents to let me keep something in the house. That time it was, we're talking late 70s. So the husbandry, the equipment, knowledge, etc., just wasn't what it is today. And your most common supply for any reptile at that point would have been a pet store, and most likely, 90% or better, it's going to be a wild caught individual, and they tend not to do well, especially when you have little or no knowledge of anything really much about their natural history so much, even tricks, tips on how to get a feeding, what it might feed, and even being able to source food for that matter. Um, and then, just kept, going at it. Then what was it about around 1990, um, started getting back into reptiles. I was out of it for a little while and then got back into it. There was a pet store that was maybe a half an hour from my house, but they had a really very unique and very collection of reptiles. And at that particular time, captive breeding was starting to come online a bit more. And so you were seeing more captive bred things in even the pet shops. This one was a family owned one, and their specialty was rearing, birds like cockatiels and cockatoos and things of that nature. And they had, like I said, a really good reptile department. Anyway, there were some more books coming online then, and you could peruse and kind of see some different things. And one of the books that I bought that sort of changed my life, I guess, forever was the Reproductive Husbandry of Boas and Pythons by Ross and Marzek. And that for many was a Bible, and that was the second edition, not the first one, but it was the second edition that come out, I guess, right around 1990. And within that volume, there were pictures, not just of green tree pythons, but of rainbow boas and some other species in there, with the photo credit of Trooper Walsh National Zoological Park. Well, the National Zoo is only about 35, 40 minutes from, where I lived. And so, before I ventured down there, to try to track down this trooper fella, um, I was, I bought a sight unseen Brazilian rainbow boa from this pet shop, and they had placed an order with their supplier, and several weeks went by. The animal didn't come in. So, we walked in one time and I basically told him, look, what can we do? And through that conversation, it kind of came out that this person, this supplier, was a breeder that was also in Maryland, and he wasn't very far from me. And I told them, look, I'll give you whatever the retail price is. Let me just go to this guy's place and get it, because who knows when you're going to get it. And they called this guy on the phone. I went up there, and this person turned out to be Peter Call. And I'm not sure if you heard the name, but he was the guy who basically bred albino boas for the very first time in 91, I think it was 92. And then subsequently was the first person to produce the piebald ball pythons. Right. So he was a big time major breeder. He also had a variety of other things, Brazilians included, blood pythons, Argentines, red tails, you name it. And it was the first.
And Tim, was he happy for you to come around? Was he was it?
Well, it's funny. Yeah. So apparently he was not at first. And it turns out that he was basically my age. And so I was going to a university that was literally 20 minutes from his place. And so we actually became friends. I got my nephew, Sean Stewart. You might have heard the name Christian Stewart in the barn.
Yeah.
As with respect to the green trees. So he's my nephew. He's my sister's second oldest son. The oldest son,
Christmas
Sean,
time at your house must be real fun.
Right? Yeah. So anyway, Sean and I wound up volunteering for him. Just going up there cleaning cages, basically. But it was the first time I ever stepped into a large scale reptile breeding facility. Yeah. And I was just overwhelmed. I couldn't even believe what I was looking at. I mean, it was just sensory overload. I mean, these reptile specific cages. At the time, he was using these thermostats called microclimates. They were
Yeah.
sourced out of England.
Yeah.
Bob Clark was bringing them in.
We still have them.
And yeah, well, we can't get them anymore here.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I guess herp stats are the big thing here now, and they're good. I still have a couple of microclimates downstairs in the box somewhere. Anyways, I mean, it was just I just didn't even. It just blew me away. I mean, not just the animals, but the whole
Yeah.
setup, the enclosures, everything.
What sort of numbers are we talking, Tim? Like, was it warehouse size? You know, what are you?
No, it was in the basement of his house.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I guess in terms of numbers of animals, when I first went there, my guess would be roughly 100 to 200.
Yeah. And that was amazing back then, right? Like, context is important. Like,
I mean, amazing. I mean, all I've ever seen up to that point were pet stores.
Yeah.
Where you'd see 25 maybe at the best.
Yeah.
You know? And so immediately when I went down there, I went to a payphone because there were no cell phones back then, and called Sean, and I told him, you know, I said, look, man, you got to get up here and see this place. You'll never believe, you know, what this guy has, you know. And so it was really cool. I actually witnessed the birth of the first albino boas ever born.
Wow.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, also saw the first of the piebalds hatch as well. And Pete was
sorry, Tim. That would have been absolutely mind blowing. Like when did they hatch or did they cut the egg? You know, when they cut the egg and they look at the end and they go, wow.
Yeah. Well, I remember. So Pete bought this albino as one of only 3 that were in the country, and 3, I guess, known. And a group of people in California owned all 3 of them. And Pete went out and picked the best one. He paid $25,000 US for it.
Wow. Sorry, and what, 1990?
Well, I think he bought that animal. No, the albino, I think he bought it 88, 89.
Oh my gosh.
Holy shit.
Right?
Like that would have just been an insane kind of punt, right? Back then.
The funny thing is, he bought it from people who were good at the time, boa breeders, but they couldn't get any of these 3 males to produce or breed with females. Pete had never up to that point even bred boas before. He bred pythons.
Oh my god!
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, they're thinking this is a quick 25 grand. These things are dud.
You got to know Pete. I mean, he's a wild ass. I mean, he's quite a character, but quite a risk taker too. And that's what needed to happen. And so when he bought that snake, he brought it back. He immediately started raising up a bunch of female, just regular Imparata, Colombian rainbow boas, not rainbows, but Colombian boas. Yeah. And by the time I met him, he had bred already that male to several females produce hets, had since raised them up. And so I think it was 92, 93 when that first albino was born. It was an albino to het female breeding. So I remember we were looking at the enclosure. She was right by the glass as these babies were coming out. Yeah. And like the first 3 or 4 were just normals. Oh. And then all of a sudden you see this white, and there was, I can't remember how many people, maybe 10 of us there. And it just erupted like, holy crap, it's like, because you get to see it slowly coming out, and that was quite a night, quite a thrill. And I mean, looking back on it, just that part of history I was a part of, just happenstance, just met the guy wanting to buy Brazilian rainbow boa, and a couple of years later, I'm volunteering for him over the summers, and here I am, witnessing the birth of, a legendary captive snake. Anyway, I'm not, just kind of a personal aside. I'm not really. I enjoy looking at the morphs. I'm not a big morph guy. I think in my entire collection now, I've probably got 80 snakes or so, and I think of those 80, 2 of them are morphs. Everything else is wild type.
Yeah.
So, So anyway, so then from there, I then, Sean and I talked about going to the zoo, and then we went down the zoo one day looking for Trooper. And so so the reptile house at National Zoo is like a big oval. Okay. So you walk in and you basically walk around a big oval. And there are these service doors, which are like, these brown metal doors. I guess they could be any color, but here they're brown and or gray. And so we were just walking in circles looking for somebody who worked there, right? And I remember we saw this one person come out of this door and walk down into another location, and I caught the badge. It wasn't Trooper, but now we knew what they were wearing. They basically just wore the traditional, tan khakis, and so we're down. So you walk in, you go down, and then near the one end point, I guess, the one turn, they have all their croc tanks, and they got these huge, almost floor to ceiling and really tall ceilings, just glass. And they got these poles that sort of are abutting against the glass, and they have the Cuban crocs there and uh, um, the Tomastoma, the Fuscarials. Yeah, so that's the same thing. And I forgot what else they had in there. And there is on that loop, there's a door that comes out, or a door on one side and a door on the other. So we're down there looking at the crocs, the Cuban crocs are really something. And this guy comes out. I just see him out of the corner of my eye, out of this one door, bare feet, khaki shorts, khaki shirt, carrying a bucket full of rodents, and I just caught a glimpse of the name tag, and I could see at least the TR, if not the whole name. And it was so funny. I mean, Sean and I were so giddy. It was like we just, we just spotted a movie star or something, And he goes into the other door before we realize sort of the whole put everything together. And so now he and I are going back and forth on who's going to knock on the door, and so Sean was like, "Man, you're gonna have to knock on the door." I'm like, "Shit, I don't want to do it, man. You knock on the door." So we're both going back and forth on this probably for a couple of minutes, right? So finally, I can't remember which one of us knocks on the door. I don't know if you remember the old TV show. I don't know what kind of syndicated TV shows you might go back to, but there was an old syndicated like sitcom from back in the '70s called The Addams Family.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this big butler. His name was Lurch.
Yeah.
So the door creaks open, just about maybe this wide, and his head just sticks out. His big square head, comes out. And he just looks at it. He's like, "Can I help you?" And I know we stumbled for words. I probably said something, "Are you Trooper?" or whatever, and we've seen your pictures in the reproductive husbandry book. We're very interested in green trees. Whatever we could say, but he actually was very gracious. He let us in, so we got a glimpse like behind the scenes, I guess, so to speak. And he spent probably a good 15, 20 minutes talking with us. And then after that, I wound up, the National Zoo had volunteer programs for the different departments, like birds, primates, herpetology. So during a couple of summers there while I was in college, I volunteered there because I figured that was my only shot at really, you know, it was cool to volunteer there, first of all, but second of all, just to try to continue to make inroads to Trooper. And he's an interesting guy. He is, I mean, we've known each other now for quite a long time and have spent a lot of time of late together. But he's the kind of guy that, one day he sees you and he's talkative and everything. You're like, man, this is great. We're friends, And then like the next two times he'll walk right past you and not say a word, you know. And so you're like, oh,
is he still the same now, Tim, or is he mellowed
yeah,
with
he is
age?
kind of. I mean, he goes through his things, but I think much of it now has a lot to do with the ebb and flow of his health.
Sure.
And I actually just saw him this past a couple days ago. His oldest son's getting married in early August, and so he had flown in from Portland, Oregon, which is where he lives, and so I spent a few days down there. He was actually in good form there, and he had talked about, as he has in the past, about doing some podcasts. And of course, if we can nail him down for one for your show, it'd be great to do.
Yeah.
So we'll still keep that on the radar.
Yeah.
It's just, and had this whole thing with his son and the wedding and all this stuff coming up, if that wasn't going on, that probably would have been a great time to, strike while the iron's hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he is, but he'll go through times where we text back and forth and things, flow fairly easily, and other times where he just goes right off the radar for, month, 2 months,
Yeah.
So he's that kind of that quintessential character. He's a real tough nut to crack. He's that.
He doesn't let people in very easily.
No, and
so
I guess
yeah.
back in that time, what was your, you're this. How old were you back then, Tim?
So I would say when this was going down, I was probably about 30.
Yeah.
Because I was
Okay.
still in college. Yeah, about 30.
Yeah. So you're trying to rub shoulders with this guy. Well, what was your sort of what was your plan? Was it just to simply just hang out with him, or did you have everyone sort of knows kind of what happened, with your.
Well, so we were very interested in green tree pythons, and we had never seen any.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe adults on display, at the zoo, but we had never seen a baby except for pictures in a book.
Yeah.
And we were very interested in them, and we knew they were there. We didn't see any on that visit. We did see a bunch of sort of off exhibit animals, green trees there. We didn't get a good look at them because we didn't really take a walk down the line, so to speak.
Yeah.
But we were just trying to.
It's funny, Tim. It's Joe. Would you say even in 2026 in Australia, many people have never seen in the flesh, number one, an adult green tree python, or I don't think many people have seen in the flesh a neonate.
Yeah,
and probably only handfuls of people have seen a red neonate in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And so
definitely,
we're kind of in the same epoch of time when it comes to availability. So in terms of like we understand the kind of the crazy that that you've got, because I think we both, Joe and I, are just like, to see animals of that are extreme at all in Australia is kind of so rare, and it's nuts,
so rare.
and when you talk about the seeing that first albino boa being birthed,
yeah.
it every time we see a baby pip an egg here, a green tree python baby, it is so analogous to, even in the book that Greg Maxwell, the More Complete Chondro, how he felt at that time way back then.
Right.
It is so analogous to how we feel now.
You just never forget that feeling,
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is just an amazing feeling.
Can I just jump in here quickly? Just Tim, for some listeners that might not be familiar with who Trooper is, could you just give us a bit of a summary on the significance of who Trooper is in the green python world?
Yeah, so Trooper has a very interesting history of reptile in terms of reptiles. He actually became interested in reptiles at a very early age. I want to say 5 or 6 years old. His father was a lieutenant general in the Army in World War II, later became one of the major players in the evolution and development of the CIA. And as such, they traveled a bit. And one of the places they traveled to was Central America. where apparently there's some CIA training facilities there, or there used to be. So Trooper got a very early start in education in traipsing around jungles and finding snakes. And then he later, I guess he had, a growing interest from that point. And then moving forward, he started collecting some animals, started maintaining some animals. I don't know exactly the year he started collecting or keeping green trees. I think his first animals I think were 76,
Hmm.
1976. And I know among those groups were a couple of animals that were from one of the first, I guess it was a captive hatch litter, but it wasn't captive bred. It was the gravid female that Carl Switek brought back from his travels over in Indonesia. I don't know if you're familiar with Carl Switek.
Yep.
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 Yeah. So, anyways, he then in about 1976, 77, became employed at the National Zoo in DC. And then he had been there, I think up until
Sorry, Tim. I can't let that
2000.
I can't let that moment pass. That's 50 years. 50 years ago that we're talking about first captive hatched green pythons. I think documented, right? There were
Yeah, well, I
papers
think I
written
sent
about
you a
that.
couple of the black and white pictures of him looking at the chondro eggs.
It was fantastic, Tim. It was typewriter typed papers written about that whole, I guess, detailing scientifically all of the process around hatching those temperature regimes. Yeah, it was super cool. There's something about that. You got that original typewriter type
Yeah.
papers.
Did I send you some of the
Yeah.
the black and white photographs?
I don't think so. No,
Really?
I'll have to
Okay,
look
well.
back through. You sent me so much stuff. I'd have to go.
Well, we, as part of sort of what we've been trying to do the last year and a half or so, is we've been trying to uncover. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff in the basement, and trying to dig a lot of this out and document it, digitize it. And as you've mentioned, I guess in your introduction, I guess I have kind of become more or less an archivist of sorts. I can't tell you the number of people that I don't even know that reach out to me, I guess because they know they can, and I keep quite a bit. I mean, not only from my own experiences with the green trees, but I'm probably the only person that's interested in it in Trooper's immediate circle that's willing to go through the effort to go through things, digitize them, and put them out for the
I,
general public of collectors to sort of take in. Because
I think
I'll tell you that
I think the global community owes you a debt of gratitude for that, Tim. I think that's really important work.
Yeah, it'd be a shame if a lot of that stuff didn't come out, to fruition. And Trooper isn't always the best of putting things out there, and especially now because he's just, you know, um, he's also a little bit technology challenged. Um, and so, I've kind of picked up the ball and kind of taken a lot of the pictures and, digitized them. A lot of the papers that he's published, put them, scan them into PDF files and such. Because there's a lot of people, and that's what's unique about the chondro, I guess, community in general. Is, unlike many of the other sort of species that have large, communities,
Yeah.
is the interest in the history behind them all.
Yeah.
And I know that his father, being in the military and also later in the CIA, was a big records keeper, and that's where Trooper picked up his, you know, philosophy, I guess, for documenting everything. So he kept copious records of just everything.
What was really cool of reading those old scientific papers, Joe, and you'll appreciate it, is it's like going back when we were at uni. You'd pick up those really old publications, and there's a certain style of how they were written.
Totally.
Yes, it's so cool. It's that
So
real
cool.
scientific method. Very, very nice. They're really
Yeah.
nice documents.
Well, I
Takes a
definitely
real
have
nerd to
to.
appreciate that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because given my background, read so many articles over the journey, and when you go back to those original ones, those really old ones, there's a style that was really. Anyway, that's that's such a nerd thing, but yes, you're right. Um, and also, you feel like you've got this bit of history in your hand, and it's a little bit
Totally. Yeah, yeah.
sentimental for me because I turn 50 next year, right? And so it's like far out. This is crazy. This was happening when I was being born, sort of thing. It's sort of
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's the interesting thing is, even my own ideas of Trooper have changed a lot since we've been combing through a lot of his material because I mean, this guy, I mean, he bred not king rat, cave rats back in like 1978.
yeah,
Wow.
I mean, just some of these unique colubrids and other animals that I didn't, I, I didn't even realize that they were even in collections at that point, or even in,
yeah.
probably not many zoos. And here he was breeding them.
It-
Um,
and also for the listener, he was the first person in the world to breed Komodo dragons. Is that right?
well, he was the one responsible for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the National Zoo was the first zoo outside of Indonesia to captively hatch Komodo dragons in
Mm,
1992. He was the senior biologist that was behind the enclosure design and has subsequently written, I mean, just a whole cadre of papers related to that as well.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, so this is a picture. I'll put it up on my screen here so you guys can see it of Trooper examining a chondro egg 1978, just to kind of see how well this shows up.
Oh yes, you did send me that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
1978.
So that's a lot of history there, and and just yeah, just cool stuff.
Very cool. And so, Tim, when did you
This is
start?
one of the female. This is one of the females he had bred back in '78.
Oh,
Yeah.
shit.
Wow. Look at that.
Yeah.
That's a nice looking animal.
That's
So
a good looking snake.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, Joe. What were you going to say? No, you're going to say something. You're going to ask a question.
I was just going to ask when the keeping of green pythons started for you, Tim.
So yeah. So when I was volunteering at the zoo, this is a kind of a funny story, and you guys may have heard it if you've heard some of my other podcasts, but I'll share it anyway, just because it's kind of funny, and for those viewers you may have who've never heard it. So after we, made our connection with Trooper, and after I started volunteering there, the biggest reptile show that we have in the States is the National Breeders Expo, and it's in every August, and it started up around 1989. Um, anyway, we, my nephew and several others, we had made plans one summer to go down to this show. And um, I remember sitting in the staff lounge at the National Zoo asking Trooper if he's going to this show. And he said, "Yeah, I'm going." And I told him, I said, "Well, I'm
Was this
really
a good
interested
day?
in
A good day or a bad day?
well, I mean, I guess good day in that he was talking, but a bad day and about what he said to me. So listen, so he said, "Yeah, I'm going down there." I said, "Well,
this is just wanting to make me be more cranky. Like I want to be
yeah,
more
well,"
of this cranky
he
old
said, "Yeah,
guy.
I'm going down." I said, "Well, my fiance and I were interested in buying some green trees. You have any green trees to sell down there?" He goes, "Nope, not we're sold out." So we go down there, and at that time he was working under a sort of um, company name of Ophiological Services with Eugene Bissett.
Eugene Bissett. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he and Eugene had done a lot of collabing back then, collaborating.
Yeah.
And so I go down there, and there's green trees all up and down their table. So my fiance, she goes up to him and says, "Well, I guess you have no chondros to sell, huh, Trooper?" And so he just has this little grin, and Trooper is a guy that definitely, he may give me a hard time, but he likes to rub it up, with the girls. You know what I mean? So I knew my fiance would be able to sort of make quick inroads here, and what was really funny was
You got
she
to do
really
what you got
liked
to
the
do. You
yellow.
got to do what you got to do, Tim, to get
Hey,
those.
that's right. So she really liked the yellow Neos. I like the maroon ones. So she and I were kind of arguing over, okay, well, what color phase we're going to get, and so she, we go over and we pick this one yellow one out, and he looks at her, and he goes, "You don't want a yellow one," and we were like, "Why not?" He goes, "You want one of these," and he brings over one of these maroon ones. He goes, "These are really nice."
Sorry, Tim. I know I'm interrupting.
No, go ahead.
The first, in that story, I think you did what every man should do, and that is what his significant other wanted, which was the right thing to do at the time.
Oh yeah. Well, and I kind of got an idea of what his weak spot is, so I kind of, figured I'd throw in my kryptonite and see how well it works. So anyway, so he brings over this maroon one, and so my fiance's grilling him on what's so special about these maroon ones. And this is long before we knew about the maroon ones, undergoing the more dramatic color changing. They typically are the ones that sort of become, I guess, the more high end so-called designers. And so anyway, so he's now steering her towards a maroon one, but not just any maroon one. This maroon one is a little bit bigger than the rest, but it's also 200 American more. So at that point in time, most of the chondros, general ones, were going for about 750 US in 1992. This one was going for 950. And so she asked, "Well, why is this one more money?" He goes, "Well, this one's more likely to make the journey back to Maryland," which was the drive from Florida to Maryland, which is about a 14-hour drive. Not knowing that he had driven down all these other smaller babies, and of course, they would have been fine, So we wound up buying that one that baby, right? And so the following day, I went down to the show. It's a 2-day show, and I don't know if you're familiar with this like it was like a diet drink back in the 90s, maybe early 2000s, called Crystal Light. It's like a powder stuff you put in water or whatever. Anyway, the powdery stuff would come in these little tubes. They were about this long and about that diameter, and that is what Trooper created to be the travel containers for the chondros. So he pulled me aside on this second day, this Sunday, and he was like, "Tim, I want you to look at this." So he pulls out this, Crystal Light container. It didn't have any, any labeling on it anymore, but pulls out this little snake. And he says, "I want you to have this snake." I was like, "Okay." He goes, "You've done a lot of good work down at the National Zoo. We really appreciate it." So this is where, like, Trooper sees things, you know what I mean? And has a heart of gold. It's just, it just comes out when it does for him. Right. And so he wound up giving me the snake. He said it was one of the smallest babies he had ever hatched. It was either first or second of a twin out of an egg. The egg mate died. This thing, I think, was about 4 grams, I think. And he had gotten it going. By this point in time, it had hatched out that February, and now we're in August, so it's 7 months old. So anyway, he was like, "I know you'll give it a good home, yada yada yada." So I took it, and started raising it up, and this animal did a great job. In fact, that animal turned out to be the male that was the sire of Mr. Blue.
Oh, wow.
So, and he told me at the time, he goes, "I want you to have this animal." He goes, "I don't think it's going to amount to much." So I give him a hard time about that all the time. I'm like, "Yeah, you see, it wouldn't amount to much." And then he produced the first, blue snake, you know. But that big animal that we wound up buying from him for $950 turned out to be a litter mate to that, to that twin I bought. So when I did get them at about 1.5, I think, years old. They had just started changing, and I figured out they were in fact a pair, but I didn't want to breed them together necessarily. So I started reaching out to Trooper to see if he would trade, the female, because I know he didn't want the male because it wasn't going to mount anything in his words. And so after some poking and prodding, he gave in and decided he would trade me um, a female for a female, and that female went on to become I guess, the so-called Tim Morris Blue female.
Mhm.
So she was the dam to Mr. Blue.
I
Wow.
love that. It seems like all of these chondro stories have this element of just, luck, or just the Hail Marys. Like right from your whole story, Tim, right from hanging out in the National Zoo, trying to crack this guy who's a difficult guy. You win him over. He sees that you've been doing a good job, and you've just turned up, and you're probably in his mind ticking the boxes. You're reliable. You've been doing everything that he wants you to do, and you form this friendship. And then through all of that, he gives you this snake that's, he's like, I don't know what to do with it. You take it. I know you're going to do a good
More or
job
less
with it.
what he said, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then it turns out really to be the foundation of the whole Trooper Walsh Blue Line lineage, right? In the US.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, though, and this is something I, readily put out there for everybody because, I guess I was the one who hatched out Mr. Blue. So I'll take credit for putting those two animals together, but they were the only two green trees I had.
Yeah.
And I know in a lot of ways, I reaped the rewards of a culmination of a couple decades of work that Trooper had put in
Yeah.
to the green trees. I know he didn't let out too much for what he looked for in babies, but after a while, it came out that he was very keen on very dark babies. He liked the ones with reduced pattern. Um, and so the Mr. Blue actually was a very dark baby with very little in the way of markings at all. Um, But I mean,
That's right.
I just,
It was the culmination of a whole bunch of selection that he'd
yeah, I mean, I
applied,
was a
right?
beneficiary of that. And
Yeah.
I don't think he honestly realized what was about to happen.
Yeah.
As
I
I'm sure
wonder.
he wouldn't have sent those animals, to me, that's for sure.
I wonder how different things would be, because obviously Troopers had this massive influence on the whole entire green tree parking world. Imagine if he'd decided he liked the cherry red, heavily patterned neonates as opposed to the darker, less patterned. I wonder how that would impact the way that the animals are now. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good
Who knows?
question. I mean, I wasn't around back then to kind of see some of the holdbacks that he was, keeping prior to 1993, 94. But yeah, I mean, by that point, 15 years, from his first, condor
Mm.
breeding. So he had had quite a bit of, success with them. And even like he and Eugene were still working out sort of, and I guess by that point it ironed out how to hatch these things out. You know,
Yeah.
not Trooper, but Eugene would, tell me on several occasions that he and Trooper killed more green trees than they ever hatched, trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to do it.
How to do
And as
it.
it
Yeah.
turns out, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Trooper just kind of went back to his sort of analytical and observational, um, philosophies of, well, these animals will maternally incubate. Let's see what's going on with the temperatures and everything with a maternally incubating female in order to try to replicate that in an artificial way. And so, that became sort of their protocol. Um,
Yeah. It's funny, like all the way over on the other side of the world, when we set up our incubators and we hatch out green tree pythons. I don't think, well, I don't know how many people over here really stop and think that, well, the only reason we're doing this is because you guys cracked the code, and you cared enough about documenting it, publishing it. Of course, Maxwell put it in his book as well, which we have access to. And, this was such a long time before social media and internet. And so it's so cool, really, to think about it like that. And exactly as you said, you were the beneficiary of decades of work that Trooper did. We're also the beneficiary of all of that as well, because we get good hatch rates on our clutches because they bothered to document it and didn't hold it a secret. And so, it's so cool to think like that. So every time, I think when we hatch out a clutch, we get to sort of stand on that whole body of work as well. Yeah, sure, we're doing it. We're
Yeah,
pairing
I mean,
snakes,
somebody would have
but
figured it out eventually, I'm sure. But yeah,
sure,
yeah,
but it, given
it
the
accelerated things.
given
Oh yeah.
the nicheness of it and the timing and we're talking about the 70s and the 80s. No one cared about reptiles like they do now.
Yeah, and the thing is too is that even to this day, I mean, their eggs incubate a whole lot differently than almost every other python.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know, they're a whole
absolutely.
lot more sensitive, and you don't see the same degree of stillborn, fully developed embryos in
Yeah.
like a ball python. It just doesn't happen, right? So
Yeah.
there are some touches and things, and I think it was Rico Walter who worked out sort of the consistent temperature where he basically started and ended with the same temperature all the way throughout. And I think he was one of the ones I know at the forefront of doing the substrate less
Yeah.
incubation method. Um, Trooper and I know Eugene for a long period of time were incubating artificially eggs in mass. So they would allow the female to lay the eggs, form them up, and they would leave them you know, in that
Oh yeah.
configuration instead of trying to separate them out. Um, which I think also plays some role in, you know, their trials and tribulations with it, because I think the dynamics and the way things work when a female is actually on those eggs versus when those eggs are just in an incubator in that beehive sort of configuration,
Hmm.
that things are different. And
Yeah.
I'm not so sure an incubating female and what she does and what the temperatures are directly translate to, um, success, without the female being in part of it.
Hmm.
So, because his regimen initially was running them low about 84 degrees, 83 to 84 degrees the first 2 weeks, and then ramping it up to about 87, 88 degrees. And then the last 2 weeks or so of incubation going back down to around 84,
Yeah.
because what they figured out was in mass like that, as the embryos develop, they're producing a lot of their own heat, and a lot of the internal eggs in the beehive were getting cooked if you
Hmm.
kept the temperature elevated at the end. So they worked out that the female was opening up her coils more near the end and that kind of thing, um, and generally hatch rates improved at that point.
Mm. Um, I'm not like overly familiar with exactly how the blue line lineage works. Did you have some sort of plan when Mr. Blue came out? Did you implement any sorts of plan to that, or were you just breeding?
Well, so another sort of funny side story, a quick one. Um, Other than Mr. Blue standing out from the standpoint that he wasn't he was dark. I wouldn't say there might have been a couple other babies that were almost equally as dark, but he did have uh, much less pattern than any other baby out of that litter. And that was a clutch 24, and I think I hatched out 17 out of that. anyways, we started doing some, local reptile shows here. I actually had what became Mr. Blue on a table, um, for sale for $1,000 US.
Hmm.
But I didn't know what it was going to be,
Of
you
course,
know.
yeah.
But at the time, the funny part was, well, here's the funny thing. Well, so I had mentioned before that when we first bought that first green tree python, that the standard going price was about 750 US. What happened after that point in the period of time I was raising those up was that the market kind of crashed because there were a lot of farm bred babies starting to infiltrate the US market. And there were people buying, I mean, breeders, buying a group of freshly hatched green trees, non feeding, and they'd show up at the shows for like $250.
Yeah,
Mm.
wow.
Well, somebody's looking at, Trooper's animal for 750, even though they're going to tell you this animal's fed 10 or more times, it's shed a couple times, it's sight feeding on thawed pinks. Other people are looking at these ones at $250 saying, well, I can get 3 of these things for the price of that one.
Yeah.
Had no having no idea what it was like to get them feeding, right?
Yeah. Can't be
And
that hard,
so
surely. Can't be that hard.
right. So a lot of those farm bred, fresh hatchlings wind up, I'm sure dying because people couldn't get them to feed. And so the market was sort of depressed at that point. And when Mr. Blue came around, um, well, when I put Mr. Blue as a neonate on the table for $1,000, people thought I was on
Mm,
drugs
mm,
Yeah.
because they were like 250 is what we're paying for these things now, right? So, because I knew something was kind of special, but I figured, at the time, all right, if somebody's going to give me $1,000, but I mean, knowing what I know now, that was not so bright, but we didn't know what we had, yet to be developed. So once it started to change, then I noticed there was something distinctly different with that animal, and that it basically in areas of the body that typically go green were blue, and then typically the areas of the body that would show up as blue highlights were green. And so there was a
wow.
whole lot more blue on that animal than green. And I was like, holy smokes, So the first plan, so to speak, was to breed him back to mom, because
Yeah.
that's just what a lot of line breeders did at the time, with the albino boas, the piebalds, is, you're breeding, siblings back to mom or whatever the case may be, or offspring back to the mom. Um, so we did that a couple of years. Um, did pretty well with those. There were a couple of notable snakes that came out of it. Um, the best looking one was a snake that my nephew had gotten a hold of, and he named it Azure, and it was very blue, but not a very good breeder, and it was a
Yeah.
male.
Okay. Yeah. Um.
I think he
Did,
has maybe one litter.
yeah. Right. Did Did you have any sort of ideas or hypotheses on, I guess, the mode of inheritance of phenotype, or were you even back then still pretty aware that it's kind of random?
Well, I guess my best sort of hypothesis at that time was, I knew, having bred, the that first pairing, that I kind of surmised that the lineages provided sort of the available colors, if you will, if you're an artist, but
Yeah.
then what the canvas actually turns out to look like, you know, is going to vary greatly. So, and that just seemed to be kind of the way it worked out because, it's funny after that, producing Mr. Blue, the thing that everybody was asking me was, um, can you pick me out a baby that's going to turn blue?
Hmm.
And I just would tell people, I said, there is no way really you can tell, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I remember hatching out one of the most bizarre looking maroon neonates I ever hatched out. Had this really bizarre pattern to it. And I thought for sure I was on to something. That animal turned out just completely green,
Green.
just a plain green, green tree python. So, um, but out of the litters, from the same parents, I mean, there was always a good variety. I mean, that hatch had a lot of notable animals that some friends, well, who soon to become friends, of mine, um, went ahead and bred and had good luck with.
Yeah, right. Dan,
And
did
Trooper was
you
a
have?
heavy feeder too. I don't know if you go ahead.
Yeah, okay. No, that's okay.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know if people are aware, that blue female of mine, and I do kind of keep tabs on this a little bit. I've not seen any other or heard of any other female with the reproductive output that she had. I mean, her first litter, she was bred at 2.5 years old. Her first litter she was 3
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
they hatched out in April.
How
She was 3 years old.
how
'Cause
big was she?
She was big. So at about a year and a half when Trooper and I did the trade, I think she was eating small rats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Trooper was known as a heavy feeder, and so, but she had 4 maternal clutches. And because I didn't know any better, 2 of those, well, so I bred her 1 year. She had 2 back-to-back maternal years with a year
Yeah.
in
Wow.
between.
Yeah.
And then 2 more artificial litters after that with
Wow.
Buddy Getzker's daddy pants. I don't know if you're familiar with that animal, but we bred my blue female to daddy pants around 1999, early, I guess 2000.
Hmm.
I guess no, it'd be the early 2000, 2001 too.
Wow. And they were
But she had
big
6
clutches.
litters, 4 of which were maternal.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, so the first litter was 24.
Wow.
And then the second one I bred to a male that my nephew owned. I'd have to go back and look at her data card. I still have it. Can't remember the size of that litter. Now, the size of the litters when we bred Mr. Blue back to her 2 years, they were a little bit on the small side. Now, the Daddy Pants litter, the best one we had, I think she had something like 36 eggs in that batch. And we hatched out like
That's crazy.
24, 25.
Wow. 36
And that was
eggs.
artificial.
Yeah.
36, right. What
Yeah, it
Trooper
is.
had worked out too was that a lot of these, like these so-called designer animals, were having these enormous size litters, but he was convinced that the relative clutch mass was the same. Like, for example, the Maruki types, the Arus, they tend to have smaller clutches but bigger eggs and bigger babies. These designer types tended to have larger litters, smaller babies, 7 to 9 grams versus, say, 12 to 15 for like a Ru clutch or something of of that nature.
Hmm.
Very interesting. Dan's got some large animals there. He might have some larger clutches potentially if things take off for him too.
Yeah. I've kind of flip flopped as well. I sort of started. I know this sounds a bit odd. I feel a bit like, okay, you've only got so many reproductive events, and I've got some big snakes, and I feel like they need to eat rats, because they're just big animals, and so I have been trying to select for the biggest neonate. I always keep the biggest neonate out of the clutch, regardless of what it looks like. And I've got an animal here that was by far the biggest baby out of its clutch. And that thing is sitting at like 1.9 kilos.
Wow.
Like, it is a big, big snake. And it's not fat. It is just a big, muscular snake.
Yeah.
So I look at that and think, okay, that's great. I want some of that in my collection because I want to breed for big, robust animals, particularly.
Well, keep in mind that the runt male of mine is the one who produced Mr. Blue. So
Yeah, no, I agree with that as well, because I want to have those extreme animals and try and breed them
yeah,
back to some of those bigger, robust animals to try and. So I've been thinking, toying with that as well,
yeah,
and I think too the first year or first 18 months, 2 years is really important. I think you really need to feed. You need to lay the foundation for that
yeah.
animal. I think then you pay the dividends for later on, particularly on females, for more clutches and bigger clutches.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't as heavy a feeder as Trooper, and I know Trooper and Rico Walter would debate all the time. Rico Walter, by the way, was exclusively mice
Yeah,
is what he fed his green trees,
yeah,
and he believed that the calcium to fat or whatever ratio it was better with the
yeah,
mice than it was with the rats, and so that
yeah,
was an interesting debate. But what it turned out to be was, as was the case with incubating the eggs, there was multiple ways of doing things successfully, and
yeah. The,
yeah,
the whole rodent prey item, that's a whole wormhole in itself, and
yeah,
I know for me, because I raise my own rodents, I've got the opportunity to lean out those rats before culling. So I might, I'll put them in their own grow out bin. I might just feed them, on more vegetables, and sort of lean them out for a week or two before
mm,
before they get culled. So yeah, there's many different theories, but what's the right? I don't know. But I do look. I know this. We know that female pythons need fat reserves to grow over. So
yeah.
it's a
And I think
balance.
in some cases, what I've seen over the years is, I've just seen some people overthink things.
Mm,
We're dealing with animals that in the wild are very opportunistic, and they're not necessarily turning down a meal when they
no.
don't know when their next one's going to be, and um,
Yeah.
so
And I think with someone like Trooper, you get to a point with your collection is if you're an observational keeper, if you're not, when you're feeding, when you're not feeding, you sort of get in sync with your animals. I think a lot of this advice is to maybe combat people that are just like, oh, you have to feed them, you know, 200-gram rat every 5 days or
yeah,
something, and
yeah. And I'm
it
not
has to,
measuring, rats. I mean, it's just, yeah.
yeah, it's much
Well,
more,
it's
you've got to
funny
be in
because
sync.
his feeding philosophy with snakes sort of matches his feeding philosophy of his with himself. He's very food driven himself. So that may play a role in it. But one of the things I learned from him that I've always carried forward is your your best information is by simply observing the animals. You
Yeah,
know, like when someone would ask Trooper, like, well, what temperature should I keep this snake at? He goes, just watch it. If it's always on the warm side, heat it up a little bit. If it's always on the cool side, you know, or if it's always, on the warm side, heat it up. If it's always on the cool side, cool it down a little. You know what I mean? Like if it's not moving, thermoregulating back and forth, that kind of thing. So
yeah, and I know for new keepers, it's just an infuriating answer, because people are like, yeah, but
Yeah.
I just need to know what
well,
is the
and
formula?
that's the cool, and that was the cool thing about Trooper back then is that he had a keen sense for people who, in his mind, he thought were just kind of fly by night people. They see this thing, they want to get into it, and who knows where it goes from there, but they want everything now. He was sort of the mindset that, I've grown up loving these animals, and I've learned how to do everything I can do by observing, learning from my mistakes, failures, and such. And what you're basically asking of me is you want my 20 years of experience in half an hour so
Yeah.
you can just go and run with the ball. But in essence, go learn about the animals, And I think that's might rub some people the wrong way, but I agree with that because I don't know about you guys there in Australia, but I know in the US, I mean, there's a litany of people that look at snakes as investment things, and they just want to get
Yeah.
into it to make money. And there's nothing wrong with making, money on a hobby that you have, of course, but they come in with a lot of money and it's an investment. And so he's always been kind of the mindset, I mean, he loved making money from the animals, don't get me wrong, but he was always of the mindset that, these are living creatures and he has a active interest in preserving and conserving.
I think
Yeah,
I
and
think
I think
the
also. Oh, sorry, Joe.
You're right, Dan. I was just going to say, I think that the foundations and some of the overriding rules and laws and things of the reptile hobby in Australia don't really allow for it to become a really lucrative business in breeding snakes. And I also think that the population as well kind of keeps things pretty slow. There's probably a small handful of guys that breed snakes for a full-time living in Australia, and they would be breeding a shitload of snakes for pet stores and that sort of thing. I don't think the high end
Right.
stuff. I don't think it's quite there yet.
Yeah,
Well, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, because that way, in a sense, that there's those regulations or whatever they may be are sort of vetting, the people automatically of, you know, why do you want to get into these things?
Yeah.
and the comment I was going to make was, when we've been talking like 15 years, 10 years. We're talking like significant periods of time, and for Trooper, yes, he was trying to crack the code, but also when the reproductive cycle of green pythons is so slow. They're not ball pythons. You need time to select. You don't know what you've got until they go through the OCC.
Yeah.
When you're setting up a foundation program, it takes decades to
Oh, yeah.
even
Decades.
understand what you've got and select for those traits that you want. And
Right.
this doesn't lend itself at all to get rich quick schemes.
No,
Yeah.
no, not
And
at
I
all.
mean, I've sold a lot of animals that went on to become, really good looking snakes. And, um, I've had conversations over the years where someone might say to me, well, wasn't very, very smart to get rid of that one animal or that other animal or this animal or whatever. And my whole thing was, it's the best thing that could happen because these people now are taking this animal, they're breeding it, they're producing awesome stuff. And guess what? My name's included in that conversation now because, it's part of a lineage that I had a part in.
Yeah.
And, you can't keep everything. And
No.
oftentimes, if you're selling, babies, and I know sometimes Trooper would say, well, he likes selling animals between 1 and 3 years old because they could be sexed. Well, now they got, genetic testing they can do through sheds, but um, they can be sexed. And for the maroon ones, they're going through their most dramatic color change at that point.
Yeah.
And so, and what a lot of new people don't realize is the color is going to continue to change. So all that black you see in 2 years, probably a lot of it's going to be gone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
What What was the OCC of Mr. Blue like, Tim? Did you know he was special right from the start?
yeah, and I've mentioned before that, I'd noticed that where a lot of green typically comes
Okay.
in, it was blue.
Yep. So that
Yeah,
was
so
during OCC.
yes,
That happened straight
absolutely.
away.
Yeah, I mean, I've got several good pictures sort of showing,
Yeah.
it wasn't green coming in, it was all like a teal blue.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really cool.
Tim,
So
you've obviously
So,
been around for a very long time, and things have changed a lot too since when you were doing things. But I wonder if is there anything that you look back on and you think, why did I do it that way, or is there any sort of major regrets that you have in regards to your green path and keeping?
Hmm.
It's a big question, I know.
Well, I mean, maybe one of them would have been so after before I even did anything breeding wise with Mr. Blue, I was no longer the owner of it. I sold him as a blue male. Um, and the reason being was my fiance and I were saving up for a house. And that was one of our easiest ways to raise some money for it.
Yeah, sure.
Um, so looking back, I wish I maybe would have, not have sold him. And I mean, I did benefit from it because the agreement was, as part of the sale, was that we would breed him back to the mom 2 years in a row or two consecutive times,
Yeah.
before the new owner could take and breed it to whomever he wanted. Um, and so I did, benefit a little bit from that. Um, but also too, the guy who bought it for me, his name was John Holland. He was also good friends with Trooper, and he wound up doing some collaborations with Trooper. There was a female that Trooper had. They named Carolina,
mm,
another one Forest,
mm,
um, and they bred Mr. Blue to those two females, and um, so they did some things that I might not have done
yeah.
had I held on to them. Um, so no, I don't think there really was anything, you know, um, too much. I mean, I get some friends that give me a hard time because I don't have any green trees anymore, and
Mm.
and they'll tell me, you know how much you can sell these things for just because they came from you, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, but the babies have kind of worn me out over the years. It's just you deal with the prolapses and just some of these other things, just getting them feeding. It's just you know, um, I kind of have a very diverse interest. My collection now probably comprises of 20 20 to 25 different species. So I don't
Wow.
have a big group of any one thing. I've got a variety of different things. Um, and so it was a little more focused towards the green trees then, but I still had other things.
Yeah. What does the collection look like now? Have you sort of geared towards some things that may be a little more basic or simple to reproduce and establish?
You would think so. Yeah. So, I mean, one of my arboreal sort of animals I've really enjoyed working with, and I've got a really nice looking gravid female now that's probably she'll have babies September, October, and it's an annulated tree boa.
Cool. Yeah.
So I've got a really nice pair of red, sort of reddish
Mm.
parents. Typically, you see them either in brown or like a pale, like salmon orangey red or red, and so that's something I'm really excited about. I mean, I've produced them two prior times, but they're a lot of fun. Um, Carpet pythons I've done. I had a pair of, I guess they call them New Guinea carpets now, um, that I've had for a number of years, and I've bred them a few times. And I've gotten into some colubrid species. One of the ones I've bred now a couple times, but they're worse than chondro babies are the Aurora house snakes. I don't know if you've seen those. They're like a green snake with an orange stripe down the back.
Oh
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
wow.
Um,
Yeah.
they're really they're really pretty. They're very uncommon, and I can understand why. I mean, the babies are ridiculously hard to feed, even when you're trying to feed them things they will eat. Apparently, the only thing we really know about them in terms of natural history is they like to eat house geckos, and I still have a couple contacts at the National Zoo. They've got house geckos running all over the zoo, free range, and so they'll collect a bunch for me, and they'll eat them, and then they stop eating them, and it's like, all right, well, this is what you want to eat, but now you don't want to eat them anymore, and So I've got a clutch now incubating that should hatch out in probably 2 or 3 weeks. But I'm giving, it's a clutch of 7. I'm giving 3 of those to a friend who's a condor breeder here named Buddy Buscemi.
Mm-hmm.
Not that bring GTP keeper.
Yep.
He's very good at getting things started, and he was interested in them. And so we just did a reptile show together last weekend. And I told him, well, here you go, buddy. You want some? I'll give you a couple right out of the egg. If you learn how to give them the feed, that's what I'm hopeful for. And I've got a friend out in Colorado who does a lot of work with house snakes, and so I'm going to send some out there.
There's
I'm still working on the babies from last year.
Oh,
all
jeez.
you guys are retiring. You're gonna start being more dangerous probably in the next decade.
I was just going to say there's some sort of sickness, I think, in many reptile keepers' heads that we like the challenge. Like, yeah, I'll take on some real tough feeders just to see how I can torture myself over the coming months.
Yeah, well, there for a while, I used to get a lot of other breeders, difficult feeders to get feeding. And there's just certain techniques. I mean, there definitely is a skill to that you can acquire, and you just learn. I mean, a couple of when I first bred the clutch that contained the Mr. Blue, I had about 7 animals that I was just pulling my hair out, and I had several conversations with Trooper about what to do because I didn't know. And he was the one who first, kind of guided me towards not being so gentle with them. He basically told me, look, I mean, these things are reflex feeders in the wild. Don't be afraid to, give them a good pinch and try to get them angry and, get them biting, and just some different things related to scenting. His go-to scenting was he would bring a chick home from the zoo and, kill it, open it up, and dip the pinkies in the fresh chick blood. And that worked wonders for him. I could never get that to work. The best thing for me was just pulling feathers off of a, frozen chick. And when you thaw a pinky out in water, you just put some of these feathers off the scruff of the neck, the real fine feathers.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, a lot of the stubborn feeders would go after that. And then in dire straits, I mean, I would just start feeding them mouse tails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can always get them biting something.
If I bought a live chick home for that purpose, I'd just end up with a pet chicken. That's what would happen there.
Yeah, I don't think I could have done the same thing, but he coming from the zoo field and doing the stuff that he did, it was
means to an end.
Means to an end. Yeah. There's a lot of skills. Go, Dan.
No.
I was just going to say that
there's a bit of a lag between you and I. See,
I think there is. Yeah, there's a lot of skills there that you accumulate over the years, and you can hear and get tips and advice from other people, but you don't really have that skill isn't really in your repertoire until you've used it and had success or failure with it. I think there are so many little skills that really come along with experience and actually trying them.
Yeah. And I was going to say,
and that's that's a tough thing for somebody just starting out to learn, and and that definitely separates some of the people who decide to stay with them and ones who don't. So
I was going to ask Tim, now that you're retired, do you have a desire to pick up some green trees at all?
Yeah, I might. I mean, I feel like it's not completely out of the question for sure.
Would you be interested in picking up things that carry your lineage?
Not necessarily. I think I mentioned in a couple of text exchanges that I'll lean on you guys to to get me out a couple of those Iron Range animals. I've always had a hankering for those, you know.
That's right.
Well, Tim.
Well, the
Tim,
Maruki types, I guess, is as close as you can get to those, and those I still really like.
Yeah.
And even some of the high white Arus, I still really like. So something along those lines, I think, would be something might be an avenue where I dive back into it.
Cool. Yeah.
You know, something
Interesting.
about a nice green animal with a white stripe on it is very appealing.
if you ever want to come and see them, you just let us know. I'm in the closest city to where they are. It's about a 10-hour drive from me. So you ever want to come out and see them, we can sneak up there for a weekend.
Well, that has
That's
definitely
no
been
worries.
something I would. I mean, I'd love to just get out there, just even get there, the Outback or anywhere, just to see some of the animals that I've worked with over the years.
Yeah.
You know, in the habitat, or just see some of the habitats. Period.
I was going to say, Tim, we'll let Joe drive, and we'll just jump on a plane and fly.
You can fly up.
We'll meet him there, right? Well, it's funny, you know, back in the early 2000s, there was a guy, David Wilson. Do you know the name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
David Wilson?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Yep.
Yeah, well, he did 2, I think 4 or 5 month stints up in the Iron Range. He would go up in the dry season and basically live there for the whole wet season. And he was the one that sort of first documented a lot of the field observations for these, Australian greens anyway.
Yeah. Oh, he'd be an interesting fellow to chat to, that's for sure. We're getting pretty up there.
He doesn't do it anymore. I mean, he got out of it.
Yeah. We've got a funny lag here. I was just thinking we might look at rounding things out pretty shortly. Is there anything pressing, Dan? Any other topics you wanted to cover?
No, none for me.
You're happy?
It's been great.
It has been great. Tim, just before we started recording, you were going to ask us something.
Yes, still want to ask you. So this is a conversation that's come up a couple times in conversations I've had with a few people that I was sharing that I was coming on your podcast. And how do you guys procure green trees where you are?
I don't know how to answer that.
It's all captive bred. Well, it's all captive bred. We have very strict reptile licensing laws, so we all have to keep logbooks of our collections. And every state has slightly different rules, but in our state, every animal's accounted for on an online logbook with the government.
Now, are these animals that you have, not you personally, but have been imported into Australia?
Look at there's a history on that, and maybe Joe, you'll talk about the history. With the amnesty, there were animals in the country that are non-native, and so there
was a guy I remember back in the day, John Weigel.
Yeah.
He had some. But are those animals sort of the basis for the bloodlines with which you guys are working with? Are you able to get anything new in now?
We're not able to get anything new in. Yeah. No. Go ahead, Dan.
So you're not allowed to import green trees from anywhere, no matter what the documentation would be.
No. So no legal importation.
No, unless a zoo could potentially, but they'd have to make a really good case as to why they are importing a species that is already well represented here anyway. I know that there were zoo animals imported from even the US in sort of the mid-2000s. There were some animals that came from there. But, obviously, naturally, there's no red neonate animals native to Australia. So, in the early 2000s, there was an amnesty where people were able to declare the animals that they had, and in the aftermath of all that, it kind of made things above board. There's actually a podcast episode that we did a while ago with Andrew Owen, he talked a lot about the origins of all that sort of stuff. But there are also certainly some animals that raise some eyebrows in the hobby as well. That is for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, some of the animals or the pictures of the green trees that you guys have sent
Yeah.
are impressive.
Yeah. And so every time I sell an animal, so if I sold an animal to Joe, I have to fill out paperwork that shows that it goes out of my collection and goes into his collection.
Yeah.
And he then fills out his paperwork to say he imported that animal from my collection, and we all have license numbers and all of that.
Yeah.
So
now, are you able to export your animals outside of the country?
No. It's just
No. Wow.
And
No
we
way.
can't
Yeah.
send them to Western Australia. So it's only East Coast
Right.
states.
Yeah, that's
and
probably
not Tasmania either.
significant reason why the hobby's not as big, I guess, or the number of keepers aren't as numerous.
Yeah, I guess
yeah.
we're all dealing with captive born and bred. So there's I guess producing the quantity. Yeah, but it's
How robust would you say that the genetic variation or variety is, the gene pool?
I think it's pretty good. I think there's enough diversity. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also
And
like
it's illegal to keep any of the native ones, correct?
no, we can keep native
it's legal
ones.
to keep natives.
It's legal. Yeah, they
You
were
can-
collected.
You can keep.
Yeah, they
Wow.
were collected
Okay.
legally several times, I believe. Collected and brought into private collections. I believe the basis of that was to try to prevent poaching. You know, they were some capable hands went up there and collected them and then have reproduced them. One thing that Australia we're kind of lacking a bit, and it sort of does go back to that sort of amnesty grey area sort of era, is that the record keeping and the lineage of things is a bit questionable, because people didn't necessarily want to track back, you know, non-native animals into their collections. So now that it's all seemingly above board, the lineage and the pedigrees and all those sorts of things are becoming well, and you know, keepers are seeing the importance of it as well. So yeah, we're getting better. The record keeping is developing currently, I think.
In that podcast, Tim, with Andrew Owen, he was detailing that different government organisations would seize people's collections.
Yeah.
At that time, so it was really underground.
Yeah. Answer something for me. So, if the record keeping is really good and you got the government knows what you have, what you produce, et cetera, what is their reasoning behind not allowing you to export an animal out of the country if it has the paperwork? I mean, what's different from that to selling it to, to someone else?
I don't know the reasoning for exporting. I don't know, Joe. What would be your...
I think they just like to stand tall on their super strict no import, no export rules. And if they were to allow, one thing, then they'd have to probably open up the gates to allow a lot more. I think it's just easier for them to put a blanket no on it. And, you know, even if it somehow became super, super lucrative for them, you know, if someone said, I'll pay $10,000 for each Australian green python, it would still be a big fat no from all of the regulatory bodies. No one would go for it, unfortunately.
I guess what's interesting, are you guys aware of the HBO docuseries coming out in August?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, what's interesting is, and I'm sure the government understands this, or the parties to be, the wildlife folks. I mean, there is an awful lot of Australian perps worldwide.
Yeah.
Correct.
And my understanding is everyone in someone's possession outside of Australia was gathered illegally. and exported illegally somehow.
Not
I understood
not
that.
entirely true. So from
Now there
my
was some
understanding,
going out to Europe, I guess, legally for a period of time.
and the US. So I believe like rough scale pythons are one species that was exported legally amongst a few others. So I think a lot of it was done legally just a very long time ago. And
Yeah,
I think if some zoos, some like maybe higher profile zoos got together and wanted to do an export, I think that they could. They'd just have to get with some other higher profile zoos over here and make a good case for why
yeah,
the animals need to get out.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly appreciate the wanting to reduce the exploitation of your native, wildlife. I mean, that's certainly commendable, but it just, as a
Yes.
lot of regulations are here in the States, there are sometimes, counterproductive, or they're not actually going to um, affect those that want to, operate on the gray or black market.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tricky. It's really tricky.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
funny one. Well,
What's interesting, I did a little genetics research years ago with trying to genetically fingerprint. As you know, the Australian green trees resemble to a degree the southern highlands, Indonesian or so-called Maruki types.
yeah.
Um, and of course, then you got the Arus, which have a little more white off the vertebrae. We were seeing if there was a way of genetically fingerprinting any random animal to be able to source it back to the source population.
Hmm.
Oh
And
yeah.
what was interesting was that, the Australian on the microsatellites, these little sections of DNA that we were looking at, and I think this was, corroborated with some research that Steve Donnellan had done back in the early 2000s. He had done some genetic research on green trees and Morelli as a larger group. Um, the The Arus and the Australians, the Iron Range, were more genetically similar than the Iron Range to the Marukis. So, in other words, the two that would appear to an untrained eye to be more physically, phenotypically similar were genetically a little more different than, the Australian and Aru, which
Aru. Yeah.
to an untrained eye, you'd say, well, that clearly is different than that
It's
because there's
definitely that.
more,
Yeah.
white off the backbone and that type of thing. So that was kind of interesting.
That's very
And of course, in
interesting.
proximity too, across the Torres Strait, you would have thought that, genetically speaking, that there would be more genetic similarity between the Australian and the southern Indonesian
Tim,
varieties.
how did you facilitate that study? How did you get with the guys to do that? Were you working in some sort of lab, and how were you getting the samples?
Yeah, so I was working at Towson University here in Maryland at the genetics lab. And so the reference samples that I got, I was able to get. So when David Wilson did the studies up in the Iron Range, he did the he tracked animals, he pit tagged a lot of them. Um, anyway, every animal that he collected, he took and got a scale clip, put it in ethanol, and then
Yeah.
shipped it back to Steve Donnellan, who is sort of the curator, I guess, of the genetics lab at Adelaide. Um, and so I was able to get David to get Stephen to send me over a half dozen or so scale clippings, which I was then able to extract the DNA from and basically set up their microsatellite signature.
Hmm.
Um, the southern Indonesian and the Arus came from the green tree farm over there in Indonesia.
Right.
Bushmaster, I think, Cameron Tabetalan.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a guy, the Russian guy, who had passed away a little while ago. He was sort of he came from the Russian zoo to work there, Vladimir.
Vlad. Yeah.
And he sent me a bunch of sheds from some of their documented Aru and southern Indonesia types. The problem I ran into was that in order to sort of assign an animal of unknown origin to a source population, you either needed a lot of microsatellite regions that matched up, or a very large reference group populations. And so, because the Australian samples were limited, at best I could get were 6. Um, I needed to get a lot of areas that matched up. And so I was running into issues with getting consistent amplification of some of these microsatellite regions. Um, and then the other problem I ran into, even when we were starting to get better at it, was at that point in time, genetic studies began to, or at least publishers began to require GPS data on
Yeah.
genetic samples.
Hmm.
And I had them for the Australian samples because David logged that in, but because the Arus and the Indonesian ones didn't have that information, that sort of put things at a standstill. I mean,
Yeah,
it was still
for sure.
informative. You could see, the patterns, but it just wasn't publishable in a journal.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think that's
I was just
you've gotten
trying to look at the.
go Dan.
Oh, sorry, I was just looking at the Dan Natouche paper, just when he did his
Yeah, so
phylogenetics.
Dan came along after David. So
Yeah, so I was just
Dan
looking
and
at
David
where the
knew each
branch
other.
was.
Yeah,
Anyway, that's
yeah.
another
David actually went
episode.
on to study penguins down in Antarctica.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
that's cool.
so he wasn't even a snake person.
Hmm.
He just because we brought him over actually in 2005 or 2006 when we were doing these arboreal symposiums in St. Louis. We brought David over. I'd learned of his research, and we brought him over to give a talk. And you know, a lot of people were expecting this big herp guy, and he's like, "Look, I'm not a snake guy. I'm not really into reptiles, but what attracted me to the green trees was they were very sexy, to put in his words. They were
Nice.
the sexiest animals that he knew of, and so that piqued his interest to go and do some work. So then he published his work, did his stuff, his doctoral stuff, and then jumped out of the green trees and went and did penguins. And then Daniel Natush came along and kind of picked up the ball where he left off. And then of course Daniel did some field studies over in Indonesia too, which
Yeah.
David hadn't done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
Well, this has been a very informative and full podcast, I would say. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, fellas. Thank you so much for your time, Tim. This has been excellent.
hey, my pleasure, guys. Anytime.
Yeah, I think we
I
could
think
go
what's
for
blowing
hours.
me away. It's still light over there, Tim. Must be 9 o'clock at night.
Oh no, it's it's only about 7:40. Sun
Uh-huh.
goes down. It gets dark here around 8:30 at night now.
That's
Oh,
cool.
geez, that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Oh, well, Tim, you get in Trooper's ear for us, all right? So we can.
Well, I've been in there. It's just like I said, trying to line up the stars. Where I'm there because I got to help out with the tech stuff, and he's
Yeah, of
willing, and
course.
you guys are available.
Awake.
So, um, but like I said, there might be a time when I'm over there and he wants to do something, and there might be,
That's it.
what time is it? 9, 10 o'clock at night, our time. Yeah, you guys will be up. So you may get a Instagram message saying, "Look, guys, it's now or never. Get it set up."
Well, hey, I'll
Sounds
bust
good.
my plans wide open. We'll
I mean,
make
that's
that
what we
happen.
had to do for one that we did. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll make
So
it
that's
happen.
what we had to do. There was a podcast here, Condra Bar Room.
Yeah.
I was helping these guys out trying to get Trooper on, and they like to do live shows.
Hmm.
And I told them that's probably not going to happen. This is probably what's going to happen. Not because I'm against it. I don't care less, but Trooper just rolling the way he does, I told him this is probably going to be taped, and you're going to have to either spur of the moment get it put together, and we just happened to luck out that one time and get him on, and so
Yeah.
hopefully we can have that happen for you guys. I know he'd enjoy talking to a couple of you guys because he had a lot of contacts there. Not a lot, but he had several. John Weigel being one of them.
Yeah.
From way back in the day. So
Yeah, that'd be
he
very
knows
cool.
some of the people over that end.
Very, very cool. All right, Tim. We'll
Yeah,
we'll wrap this up, I think.
keep trying.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, Tim, and thank you, Dan, as well for facilitating this one, mate. Much appreciated. Lag? No lag? All finished? Okay.
No worries.
As always, everyone.
It's been great, Tim. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, guys.
All right. Thanks so much for listening, everybody, and feel free to reach out to us on Instagram, joemac.uthl, and Dan is red_earth_reptiles. And if you've enjoyed the content, please consider liking, subscribing, and following along. And thanks for listening to Chat GTP. Cheers.